Alabama falls to Tennessee 17-24 was the final in Neyland. If you're Alabama today, how can you respond from what happened yesterday? Because now you fall to 10-2, I guess, being your ceiling when it comes to the regular season. What's next for Alabama? Can they still make the college football playoff? Also a discussion worth having. We'll unpack that right now. Make sure you are subscribed right here to the On3 YouTube channel. If you're listening on podcast, we appreciate you being dialed in on podcast, baby. Alabama fans, I think a lot is still in front of your football team. We'll talk about that as we go here, but appreciate you being locked in and being subscribed. So here's the reality. If you're Alabama, you need to win out. You need to win out. Because 9-3 is not going to get you in the college football playoff. You know that. I know that. Everyone in Tuscaloosa knows that. That is now what the situation is. Also, quite frankly, 10-2 with losses to Vandy and Tennessee, you probably need some style points the rest of the way here. Probably need to make it a situation where people remember the defining win over LSU or the defining win, whatever it is on your schedule the rest of the way by a certain margin. Might need some style points here. Just sort of the conversation we need to have now about Alabama. But when it comes to what happened yesterday, I think you got to be encouraged by how the defense played, man. Because that was the question going in, right? Was like, hey, Vanderbilt kind of got after you. South Carolina kind of got after you. Where's the defense at right now? The defense answered the call to action yesterday, man. Allowed 0 points in the first half. Got 3 turnovers in the first half. And if you're Alabama's offense, it's like, hey, Coach DeBoer, we got to find a way to capitalize here. When they give us gifts, we have to cash in. And we didn't see that from Alabama yesterday. As unfortunate as it is to say the Sunday morning after, if you're an Alabama fan, like you were not able to maximize what Tennessee gave you, or quite frankly, what your defense gave you. And that's the concerning thing. Since the game against Georgia, it feels like the offense has sort of plateaued. And another thought for me around this is like the offense feels like it needs some momentum to get something going. And I don't mean that from a gameplay perspective of like defense has to give you help or that you need like the game flow to go a certain way. I mean like offensively, you need one thing to happen for everything else to happen. Like I think they need Jalen Milroe's legs to get cooking, to get working, to force that defense off balance for other things to open up. A better way to say it, I don't feel like Alabama offensively is great at the cold open. Like, if things are not going their way and it's 3rd and 12 and they got to launch a bomb deep, like, I don't feel amazing about them having the ability to have those starts if they don't have the Jalen Milroe legs working or the run game working. Now, credit, Kalen DeBoer and this staff in the second half, they were able to get more going offensively and a lot more going on the ground. But, like, 2 weeks in a row now, you play formidable defensive fronts, and quite frankly, they limit you and dictate terms of the football game. And I know that's kind of an unsettling thought because that's not really who we've seen Alabama be over the course of the last few years under Nick Saban. But like this is right now the reality if you're Alabama. It's not to say they don't have good players. I don't know if it's a Jalen Milroe thing. I don't know if it's a cohesion thing. I don't know if it's a skill players thing. I think that's obviously a conversation point around Alabama is the skill players in the perimeter are not the Julio Jones types or the Devontae Smith types or the Jalen Waddle types that have taken over games previously. But like at the end of the day, man, you have to find a way to have that killer instinct. And that is what has made Alabama over the course of however many years. Like whenever they were back against the wall, like they were yesterday, not just in that game, but also like situationally with them already having lost to Vanderbilt, we see Alabama teams bow up, flex up, and then go to town on teams. And I kept waiting for that to happen with this Alabama team. I kept waiting for the Saban traits that I assumed were still within this football team to show themselves. And I keep going back to the Georgia game because it's so surprising and unsettling. Like, we saw this Alabama team look like the best team in college football in that game against Georgia. And the second half was the second half, but like since the first half of that game now, we have not seen Alabama return to that same kind of form. And so you get concerned now going the rest of the way, like, okay, what's going to happen, when we go to Death Valley, assuming at night? What's going to happen when we get in these spots where we have to flex up and we have to answer the call to action? Because Alabama now, from a roster perspective, is good enough to win every game they have left on their schedule. Alabama, from a roster perspective, is good enough to have beaten Tennessee yesterday. But talent and roster isn't what wins you football games. It's making the actual plays. Okay, so I don't know if I would say that Kalen DeBoer and his staff were out-coached or anything like that. It just feels like Alabama did not have, again, that mentality in that we're going to kick the door in and take over this thing that we've seen Alabama have previously. So what's the answer there? I don't know. It feels a lot more like it's locker room fed than it would be coaches fed. But again, to the exact same token, as a coaching staff, you have to set the tone for your team to go get it done. Because I think the question across the board here for everyone is like, well, what's wrong with Alabama? And I don't think it's one answer. I think there's responsibility on the execution side. I think there's responsibility on the coaching staff. I think there's responsibility on the leadership in the locker room. Like, everybody has some piece of this to own. And that's the way that college football works. There is no one person that's ever solely responsible for a loss or for a win. It's a team game. That's why we love it. But at the end of the day, man, like, you cannot, run for what was, Alabama averaged, 2 yards a carry, 75 yards on the ground. Jalen Milroe, he was the guy that you were expecting to really be the force to take over this game with the way that Tennessee was going to play you up front, and he runs for 11 yards. Ryan Williams had a ton of targets yesterday, 8 catches. That's not to dunk on Ryan Williams. That actually is a tremendous number to have, so don't hear me incorrectly. But with how often I felt like they were going to count on him to make big plays, weren't able to get it done. And so when we look at this the rest of the way now, the Saban not there anymore moment was against Vanderbilt, where you lose that game, because I think if Nick Saban's still there, it's very, very fair to question, like, hey, would that have happened? I guess we'll never know. This, to me, felt like the slap in the face moment of, okay, like, hey, we got to figure it out. Saban's gone. We got to figure it out here. Because, again, I think they're still more talented than who they're playing against the rest of the way. But my questions are, can they handle the situation they're now in from a composure perspective? Because you got players on the team retweeting criticism about your head coach. You now have lost, another game, which is, a thing that this team is not accustomed to. Nobody signed up to go play at Alabama to lose multiple games in the regular season. Like, can you handle that? And going back to the coaching staff, I said it's not on any one sector of the team or any one sector of this operation. But I think as a staff, you do have to find ways to pivot and say, okay, for whatever reason, this isn't working. For whatever reason, we can't get a push up front. For whatever reason, we're struggling now in ways we haven't struggled since Georgia. How do we scheme around it? Do they have what they've had previously at Alabama, personnel-wise, outside of Ryan Williams? I don't know. Doesn't feel like it. Do they still have, I think, more than enough personnel to get it done going out the rest of the way? I think so. So I want to make sure I make this clear on Ryan Williams. With 8 catches, that's a tremendous football game. With what he's doing as a true freshman, that's a tremendous football game. But for them to go at him as much as they are and depend on him as much as they are, there's a couple of plays where it's like, hey, we got to make those. Got to make those. Jalen Milroe probably got to help him more too, but I think if you're Ryan Williams now, with him being the best receiver on their football team, you're going to count on him to be the guy going forward. So it's a lot of weight to put on a true freshman, but I'm excited to see how he responds because I think he's built for it. So, again, Alabama falling to Tennessee. It's an unsettling feeling in Tuscaloosa. The college football playoff hopes are not dashed, but they're definitely in jeopardy. How does this team respond? I'm excited to see. Make sure you're subscribed. We appreciate y'all. We love y'all. Going to keep this party rolling, and we will see y'all next time.